All right, so now we're going to take what we know about exponents and radicals and exponents that have radicals and the powers in them, or rational we call them. Now we're going to take what we know and we're going to actually apply it to solving. Okay, so instead of just simplifying, instead of just taking things and cleaning it up, now we're going to actually find out an answer. We're going to solve it just like we'd solve any other equation. So I wrote the 3 steps on how you want to solve. The first thing we want to do is isolate. Okay, and when we isolate, we want to isolate the radical or whatever has the exponent. Okay, so like in this case, this is the exponent. So we're going to isolate this, we're going to isolate here, we're going to isolate. Okay, so whatever it is that we're given, that's what we isolate, okay? Then, once it's isolated and all we have is the radical or the exponent, then we apply the opposite. So it's just like solving, you know, if you were multiplying, you divide. If you were adding, you subtract. And then, after you take it out of that radical or out of that exponent, then if you need to, you have to just finish solving like you would a regular equation. So let's apply these rules to this. And this is actually going to go really quick. If we were to solve for x, the first thing we would do is divide by 4, because that will isolate this x to the 5th. That's what we want to isolate. So we get x to the 5th equals 32. Okay, so we've done step 1. Now we have to apply the opposite. Well, the opposite of taking it to the 5th power is the 5th root. So what you want to do is you want to 5th root x to the 5th. It's like saying squaring is the opposite of square rooting. Okay, cubing is the opposite of cube rooting. 5th rooting is the opposite of to the 5th power. So if you do it on the left side, we have to do the 5th root on the right side. These cancel because they're opposites, they're inverses of one another. And we get x equals the 5th root of 32. You get used to them, and that is just 2. 2 to the 5th power is 32. All right, so that's as easy as it is. Isolate either the exponent or the radical, then do its opposite. Okay, so in this case, it already is isolated. There's nothing outside. Here's the exponent, and this is what's with it. So this is already isolated. So now we have to do the opposite. Well, what's the inverse or the opposite of the 4th power? And that is the 4th root. Okay, and whatever I do to the left side, I have to do to the right side. All right, so after I do that, this actually does not 4th root, but we finish solving from here. These 4th roots cancel. Excuse me, the 4th root and the 4th power cancel. You get x minus 3, and this doesn't actually evaluate. It doesn't simplify, so it's still just the 4th root of 21. All right, after that, so we have isolated. It was already isolated. We've done the opposite or the inverse. Now we have to finish solving. Well, now, since I'm subtracting 3, I just have to add 3 to both sides. And remember, they're different, so you cannot combine them. Okay, we get the 4th root of 21 plus 3. And then we have not talked about it yet, but whenever you take an even root, which we're going to practice more next week, it's actually the positive or the negative. Like back when we would square root, we'd say, well, it could be a positive this or a negative this. And so whenever we take an even root, we're going to throw the positive and negative in front, and we'll practice that more next week. Okay, but again, we isolate, we do the inverse or the opposite, and then we have to finish solving like we normally would. All right, so then this one, first step, is it isolated? Yes. The radical, there's nothing around it, so it is isolated. So this is what we want to solve. All right, so what's the opposite of cube rooting? Well, the opposite of that is cubing it. So we want to cube it. All right, and then whatever we do to the left side, we do to the right side. So since I cubed so that these would cancel, I cube on that side. Then I just have an equation. 2x plus 7 equals 27. Just be careful that you actually solve that correctly. I'll rewrite that one. Now, okay, so we knew it was isolated. We just applied the inverse or the opposite. Now we have to finish solving. Now it's just an equation. Subtract 7, we get 20, and x is 10. Okay, so it actually applies, it applies just like regular equations, but you just have to make sure you're isolating, and then remember that the inverse is just the opposite of those things. All right, so we have other ones to practice. Well, let me throw one more up here. All right, the one that I erased said x plus 2. So this is example. Oh, somehow I skipped 3, so we'll just call this 5. X plus 2 to the 3/4 minus 1 equals 7. So that's what the other one said. Now, we want to follow our rules. So the first thing it says to do is to isolate the radical or the exponent. Well, since this is the exponent, this is what we want to isolate. So we need to move our 1 over. So we're going to add 1 to both sides, and you get your 8. Okay? Then it says to apply the opposite, or you could think of it as reciprocal. Reciprocal will do the opposite all at the same time. So instead of looking at them separately, you actually look at them simultaneously. So by that we mean, okay, well, if this is going to the 3/4 power, you can just take it to the 4/3 power, because these will cancel. The 4s will cancel and the 3s will cancel. Well, if I did it on the left side, I also do that on the right side. So when I take it, when I use the reciprocal, it's going to cancel these out. We will get x plus 2. Then we have to think of it this way. What's the cube root of 8? And then we're going to take it to the 4th power. So the cube root of 8 is just 2. 2 to the 4th is just 16. So this is really x plus 2 is 16. Then, now that I've applied the reciprocal, now I can finish solving. I just subtract, and I get 14. All right? So, again, the same rule. You isolate, and then you do the inverse of whatever the power is or whatever the radical is, so that you can just take that stuff out and then finish from there. All right.